We are on YouTube. Now I make the switch. Old dude moves. Let's record. Hello there. We are now live on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. As you can hear, I am a little stuffed up, dealing with a cold this week. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman of The Athletic. Thursday, October the 20th, about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. How are you, Scott? I know you got a plumber coming out. That's usually not good news.
Yeah, it's not good news, but after 11 today, it'll be fun. Hopefully they don't destroy our house too much. Because I'm going out of town tomorrow, and I don't want to have to come back to that, kind of the same way. Hopefully not nearly as bad as when the sump pump went down and we had to come back to ruined carpet. But I'm keeping my positive thoughts here on this one.
That's good. That's a good way to approach it. Because home repairs suck. So
yeah, we've had them both. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Ohio State, Iowa at Ohio State this week. A huge point spread in that game. Talk a little bit of recruiting. Iowa has gotten some offers out there during the bye week. Offered some kids that were committed to some other schools. We can kind of flip through that a little bit. And it's Women's Basketball Media Day today. It's going on during our podcast, so Scott and I won't make it out there, but that's going on today. Men's basketball, about less than 2 weeks from the preseason or exhibition opener against Truman State. So it's that time of year where the sports collide, but the focus still is on football and the wild, wild west of the Big Ten. I was looking at this, Scott. Minnesota at Penn State this week, Iowa at Ohio State. Odds are those teams are going to have those teams being Minnesota and Iowa, 3 Big Ten losses after this weekend. And that really cuts down your margin for error moving forward and puts even more emphasis on that game they play in November.
Yeah, it does for bowl positioning, if nothing else. I think let's look realistically when we talk about Iowa, that frankly, they needed to beat Illinois to have a puncher's chance in the West Division. And that didn't happen. And it's because of the schedule. And this is what happens the years that you're going to play. Michigan is last year and this year is much better than Michigan's been for a while. Ohio State has been Goliath for a long time. But when you're playing both those two teams, it really, shrinks the margin of error. Minnesota, I can see a path to victory in Penn State. It's not going to be easy. Penn State got, Michigan ran for 400 yards on them last week. And Minnesota is capable of doing something similar. So I could see that. But with Iowa, as we know, and we've talked about, that there's just nothing that they can lean on offensively to give them that even slightest hope of this game. I've never seen it in covering them all these years. We've had games where we went, they're probably not going to win this one, or it's going to be really tough or whatever. But this one is in a different category to where I really can't, even in any scenario, see them hanging on and winning. Michigan in 16 was probably the closest, and they did win that game. But at least that style, and they had 2 good running backs, that could kind of power in, and they had a good quarterback too, that could kind of, play, keep away, and move the ball. And Akron was great in that game. But this one, there's just no element to me that says, yeah, if they do this, then they can win. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this as well, that, the most recent memories of Iowa pulling off big upsets have been at home. The Michigan game and Ohio State game, 16-17, those were home games. This is a much tougher task. Ohio State is also coming off a bye week, hasn't lost at home since 2015. To Michigan State, 27 games in a row, Big Ten games in a row at the shoe. It's one which is, I think I read in the notes, is a record for the Big Ten. And if not, it should be,
Yeah.
because that's insane.
Yeah.
So, it's just, it almost feels helpless or hopeless, I guess is a better word, for Iowa this week. And, when Tuesday talking to those guys, I think they have, those guys being the Iowa players, I think they have the right mindset of, embracing the underdog role. But that can only take you so far. And that's just, as you were saying, it's what is the path to victory this week?
Yeah, exactly. And, and the shame is I went through, I wrote about it today, just kind of the key matchup, the fun matchup in a normal world, if you felt like you had a shot, would be Ohio State's very explosive offense, which has more, averages more points per game than any team in the country, and has more plays of 30 plus yards than any team in the country, against Iowa's really good defense and style, which is a zone coverage that kind of mitigates and prevents those big plays. It's given up the fewest plays of 30 plus yards. It's in the top 10 when it comes to, I think it's third in scoring defense. So normally we would say, okay, this is really a quality matchup here, and it might be tough, but the problem is on the other side of the ball, and Ohio State has played really well defensively. Unlike in the past years, their new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles has done an outstanding job there.
Yeah.
But is there any aspect you can hang your hat on? Like we said with 16, Akram and LaShawn Daniels could really thump. And you had, C.J. Beathard, who was a smart, capable quarterback who's still in the NFL. In 17, you had two amazing tight ends who were first rounders. You had a right tackle who was a first rounder. You had a left tackle who's starting in the NFL. And you had those types of players that were really good. I think, and James Daniels was a second rounder at center. So there's nothing there right now that makes you go, yeah, they can do this. And that sucks. I'm sorry. It sucks. It sucks for Iowa. It sucks for the fans, because you want to at least go into a game, if you're a program like Iowa, thinking, you know what, we got a shot if we do this right. And it would be Kirk Ferentz's greatest victory if he pulled something out here, because this isn't a rabbit out of the hat. This is like a woolly mammoth out of the hat.
I think it's Max Olson on The Athletic who does I like the metric, the defensive metric of stops.
Yeah.
And I looked at it this morning. I think he posted it this morning or last night. And I'm like, all right, cool. Iowa's number 4 in that. And then I look, oh, Ohio State's number 5.
Yeah, right.
And that's really where you're like, when you look at it, you're like, even like when you look Iowa match up against Illinois' offense obviously has a great running back, but they're not world beaters.
Right.
And you feel like, all right, if we can score, obviously if they would have scored 10 points, it would have been enough. Mm-hmm. But you're looking at this game and you're like, what does Iowa need to score for to realistically win this game? Because as good as Iowa's defense is, what if it holds Ohio State to half of what it's averaging? That's 24 points. Right. Just over 24 points. Can anybody sit here with a straight face and say, oh, that's okay, Iowa can score 27?
Oh, you can't. No, that's the shame. That's the scary part. I mean, the problem is, and in looking through just the offense for Ohio State and the players that they have, out of the 13 or so players, that they play, 2 different running backs, 4 different receivers, 2 tight ends, 11 out of the 13 are either 4 or 5 stars. 5 of them are 5 stars. And you look at the 4 wide receivers, 3 of them are 5 stars. The other one is Marvin Harrison Jr., who's, Pops is in the NFL Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame, who also has three touchdown games this year. Iowa has 2 touchdown passes this year. He has three touchdown games. And a good defense is not, against a team like this, it's not going to shut them out. It's not going to keep them to 10 points. It's not going to, maybe you could do that against a run-based offense. But even then, we saw that with Michigan, that Michigan's pretty good too. But the explosive plays. Now, Iowa can limit that. Iowa's best chance of staying in the game is to prevent the big explosive play and to force them to do something they're not really capable of doing or haven't shown the desire to do, which is go 12 plays, 75 yards. Now they're capable of doing that too, because they can run the ball, and Iowa's going to have to pick its poison, and I think number one is limit the explosive plays, which means they're going to have to concede something up front. And that means Travion Henderson or Maya Williams is going to really, be potentially 7 yards a carry against them. But you got to pick something. And 31 points, to me, I think is a win against a team like this, but it's not a win when it comes to the final score. I think if they hold them to 31 points, that's something I would look at it from Iowa's point of view going, all right, that's not a bad effort.
And I'll try to we can try to give the people some hope here, the people being the Iowa fans. And I think that's your points are big play. You can't give up the big plays. If you give up big plays, it's going to be a long afternoon. So that I think is at the top of the list. I think we would agree that Iowa's offense has to show some signs of life, some even, gaining field position. It's not going to be as impactful against an offense that of Ohio State that's this explosive. But if you're sending if you're 3 and out, 6 and out, whatever it is, and you're sending your defense out there consistently to try to stop the offense that we've talked about, it's going to wear down, and it's worn down already this season. And if you can't get pressure on the quarterback, on Stroud at all, he's just going to pick you apart. You can play everything underneath. He's going to hit those passes, and the receivers are going to be open, and they're going to make enough plays to win the game, even if it's field goals. Even if Iowa holds them to 3 field goals and a touchdown, that might be enough. So, and that's asking a lot of Iowa's defense. So Iowa can't turn the ball over. I think Iowa needs to get some turnovers, win the field position battle. I know I'm trying to come up with something that's probably not likely. It's definitely not likely. But really, if you're an Iowa fan and you have hopes, this has to be an ugly, just mucked up football game for them to even have a chance and get it to the fourth quarter. And then maybe you make a play. Maybe something freakish happens. It almost happened at the end of the Illinois game with Riley Moss. You kind of just need to be in that position. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to ask because the defense is capable of doing that. I can see the path to victory with a competent offense because the defense is capable of creating turnovers, of forcing CJ Stroud. He's playing the best. Notre Dame was really good in the opener, but he's playing against the best defense that he's going to face all year until Michigan, probably. Their style of play is tough to execute against if you don't have 7 seconds to throw. Now, if you do, then you're going to have plenty of time to do it. The one thing that's going to hurt them is that they run a lot of crossing routes and they have such great talent. And if Jackson Smith and Jigba's back and he's healthy, oh my God, that guy's just the best. So, I mean, you almost have to just say just watch the game and enjoy the opponent for what it is. But Iowa's got a lot of pride too. I kind of compared this to the outsiders, the Sochas versus the greasers, on offense versus defense, because, Iowa's defense is really good and they care and they're going to fight and they're going to scrap. And they've been through the tough times. And, when you got a Riley Moss, who was a gray shirt and paid his first semester and then got a scholarship, and Kayvon Merriweather was a 2-star and Quinn Schulte was a walk-on, and the only consensus 4-star is Cooper DeJean. They've got a lot of guys who are saying, you know what, we're going to go out and we're going to play hard and win. It's just the thing I fear is Iowa's defense, usually teams scheme for it and are pretty successful in the first drive, and then things start to taper off later on. If Ohio State does that and scores a touchdown, it doesn't mean the game's over. It just means then they kick off and it's a touchback or whatever, and Iowa gets the ball to 25. In some semblance of order, there's a 1-yard run and an incompletion, and then 3rd and 9, there's a sack, and then Torrey Taylor, no matter how great his leg is, punting from the goal line, and Ohio State gets the ball at its 48-yard line, then shit, you're in trouble from the very beginning. And that's the kind of scenario Iowa can't have. And the problem is, because of their explosiveness and their passing game prowess, which Iowa doesn't face very often, is that you feel like, even against Michigan, I felt this way a couple of weeks ago, that, you don't necessarily need to score on every possession, but what you need to do is you need to move the ball enough to where they have to go the full length of the field. But when you're facing, Agbuka and Smith and Jigba possibly, and Julian Fleming and Marvin Harrison, that if they're backed up on their 10, they could hit a 90 on you right away. And that's, but Iowa can pick off a pass and score on it. At least they better score, because once they get to the red zone, they do zero with it. And that is all coordination and coaching. I'm sorry. That part, I will say, that's not on the offense. That's on the play calling and coordination.
And we'll get to that in a minute. So hang in there, Jesse, from Twitter. Let's look at Iowa's offense. The things we've heard really don't matter. We've said this since the offseason. It's show us on the field, improvement. And we heard during the offseason that things were going to be simplified after Alex Padilla's comments during the bowl prep of how, it takes a year and a half or so to learn this, and it's complicated, and all right, coaches are going to make things simpler and it's going to look a little bit easier. It looks harder. It's really tough to watch. You referenced 2013, where Iowa was able to take advantage of Brandon Scherf and a really stacked tight end room. If Iowa comes out and tries to do what it's been doing this season, which is basically what I would call its base offense, I can't see success at all. It's got to try, whether it's the short passing game, maybe throw to the backs more, some jet sweep, some pitch toss, some more counter, more hat on hat. Do something different. That's what Iowa needs to do this week. What do you have to lose? Try some different things. The things you're doing aren't working, and, expecting at some point that there's better execution or that things are going to click is just, to me, a fool's errand, especially when you're playing a team that's good.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is,
and I know the offensive line limits what you can do, but why not try?
Yeah, right. Well, when you look at the offensive line, yes, there's the potential for some progress to be gained. And and when players, and to their credit, they said, look, we're so much better than what we were, 6 weeks. But so is everybody else.
Right.
It's not like, everybody else is just here in Iowa
waiting for you to catch up.
Yeah, right. And it's just this trajectory is parallel with, unless there's injuries or something. And so, maybe Ohio State's defense has gotten better too over 6 weeks. And so there's that kind of rub there. I think the only path I can see them having some success, and it does start up front, because if it doesn't, then it's a killer, is maybe going back to that 2013 strategy of 3 tight ends. Maybe it's Potabom as your third tight end, maybe, having Laporta and Lachey and Potabom on the field, or Stylianos or whatever, and just say, we're going to try to drive you off the damn ball. And because they don't have a speed receiver that can get past Denzel Burke and Ronnie Harrison. And those guys are NFL defensive backs. There's just no way that Iowa can, they can still make plays, but not as a full flat out strategy. I think the only way they can try to do it is try to play bully ball, but can they do that? And I think the only way you can is gap and inside zone. And that's not a way to live, but it's a way to keep the ball. And maybe that's frustrating enough to where, if Iowa can maintain possessions for just a couple of first downs per possession, I'm really just uncomfortable talking like this, because it's just such a limiting type of scenario. But
Well,
if you
it
go
can be considered condescension, but it's not. It's reality. It's what we've
right,
seen for the last year and a half,
e-
basically.
exactly, and you look at okay, if they can move from the 25 to the 48, and then they stall and then punt. But at least if they're on the field for 5 minutes of game action, then it helps their defense out. And then the defense is capable of having a couple 3-and-outs. I mean, it's not like they're terrible. I mean, they're going to give up some plays. They all, everybody does. This is a good team. This is a team that you look at on their offense as a whole, 9, 10 of them are going to be draft picks, maybe more,
It's a better offense than last year, and last year was really good.
Yeah, I mean, last year they had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave,
2 top 10 receivers.
and now here you are, and you're like, Marvin Harrison's better than he is. Buka is a first-team All-American, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is the best one. He's the best
Yes.
receiver I have ever seen in the Big Ten. He's the best. What he did in the Rose Bowl, 347 yards, is just you can't put a price on that. So, and he hasn't even hardly played this year. And if
Is he back this week? Do we know?
It's iffy. He hasn't really been set out there that yes, he's playing, but
yeah, and there's no need for them to really reveal whether he's playing or not when you're playing a really good defense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the problem is for Iowa, you don't have any athletes whatsoever that can replicate what they can do in practice.
No.
There's nobody that can go out there and run, the 6'4", 220 and can run a 4.3 40 like Marvin Harrison or whatever. And then, why? Because they'd be on the first team offense if they could. And,
right.
Keegan Johnson might be the only one, but who knows what's happening there. It just sounds like, it's a frustrating area. It looks like for the coaches too. So,
yeah, I know you've gotten a lot of questions on this. And I think, to represent our podcast with the Keegan Johnson stuff, he'll play when he's healthy. And we don't know when that will be. And just, when he gets back, he gets back. If he gets back, I wouldn't expect it. Just proceed like he's not going to be back. And if he is, that's a bonus.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you're the coaches, I guess, Kirk expressed some frustration, I thought, the other day when he kind of said, look, we'll tell you when he's back. We're just not going to answer this.
Because they're probably tired of being asked about it as well.
Right. And maybe there is a difference of opinion as to, whether he can make it back or not. And then last night on the radio, Dolph asked him the same thing, and he was, less short with it, but it was kind of the same deal that we just, it's a complicated issue and soft tissue issue and stuff. And so at that point, I don't know, but there's a desire. I think there's a frustration among fans to say, just shut it down with it and just say he's not going to play the rest. Well, that's not the case. I mean, what happens if he's available to go to Purdue or play Minnesota or Wisconsin, and you get the ability to go and be bowl eligible? You want to have your best players out there, and if he's one of your best players, that's great. It does sound like Deontay Vines is going to be back, and they're excited about that, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it and beaten the horse to death that Iowa can use whatever it can get at receiver. And by all accounts, he was having a really good camp before he got hurt. So it's just another component, another, addition to a position that's really struggled in recent years. And I guess I've gotten this question this week, Scott, and would throw it your way here. Can Iowa get a moral victory this week? And is that acceptable for a program like Iowa to feel a moral victory by hanging with Ohio State at this point?
Yeah, they can. And I would never say that for just about any other game. But this is one where you can. Because let's face it, this defense has played well, very, very well, very good, whatever, whichever way you go. And then I think the offense is not. And we know that. Now, if the offense, let's say the offense gets 17 points on Ohio State, and 2 of the drives are from, 65 to 80 yards. You would feel like, okay, you're moving in a positive direction there. And let's say they lose 31 to 17. And you'd say, you know what, the defense kind of wore down at the end and gave up a late touchdown, but you were there. I think you accept that. I think you accept it as progress. Yes, you're not happy you lost, but you are happy that, hey, at least we at least we competed. And I think that's kind of a strong signal that the rest of the season, you got a chance in those final 5 games. And so moral victory, they're never going to admit that, but I think progress they'll accept. And if they lose by 2 touchdowns to the number 2 team in the country, then I think you accept it as progress, build on the things that were successful, and then move on. But I don't know. What do you think, Rob?
I think it's important to accomplish some, experience some success offensively in an important part of the game. First half, when the game isn't, because I almost feel like that Michigan game at the end was fool's gold for Iowa, because it was like, oh, we scored on Michigan, we made progress, we felt like we took a step forward, and then at Illinois. Right. So I think if first quarter, second quarter, early third quarter, you put a drive together or 2 drives together in that period when the game is still in the balance, I think that gives you a little bit more confidence. And I think it also is more legitimate in terms of, because if you score, if it's whatever, 34-3 in the fourth quarter and you throw a touchdown or 2 up there, to me, that's not going to instill any confidence in me that the offense has fixed itself if you go 3 quarters with 3 points or something like that. So I think it's really in that first half, the first 3 quarters, to just, as you said, even if you don't score, move the ball from the 25 to the 45, move the ball from, your own 25 across midfield. You get stuck. It sucks. You're like, oh, we're making progress. Punt the ball, get them down within their, because I still think defensively, and I certainly think Ohio State is capable of dunking its way down the field with the weapons that it has. Yeah. And I think Ohio and Kevin Wilson, I watched his press conference this week. He knows what he's getting into. Yeah. So he's going to know, okay, they're hell bent on not giving us the deep stuff, big play stuff. We have to be patient. And he's probably stressing, we need to be patient. Just take those 10, 12, 15 yards that you can get, 8 yards, whatever it is, and we'll just methodically move the ball. And I think Ohio State is capable of that, but just keep making them do that. And the way to do that is to move the ball offensively, put Ohio State in negative field position, way negative field position inside the 20. And also by moving the ball a little bit offensively, you give your defense a chance to catch its breath. If you keep throwing it out there, and even if Ohio State's deep in its own end, it's going to score. There's just too much talent to keep holding it down. So the offense has to help this week. We talk about the 3 phases in complementary football. If the offense sucks, this is going to be a disaster. Yeah.
Because as bad as any of the scenarios are, the one that could hurt the most is you go into halftime trailing 7-3. Yeah. Because then that is fool's gold. Because they're going to come out and score. They're going to come out and score multiple times, probably 5 straight possessions on you, because you've already kind of had that toll, accumulate on your defense. And so it really is about, maintaining possession as long as you can. And then I think Iowa's defense is capable of frustrating Ohio State multiple times, multiple possessions, because as you said, what they're going to do to compensate, they're going to probably still have one route that goes deep on pretty much every, longer pass, but they're going to have a lot of crossing routes. That's going to be difficult for Iowa to defend because they are so good and athletic. And Smith and Jigba is if he's playing, that's a really tough spot. But if so if that happens, then, but the patience part of it is important because they have really young players too. On there, even Stroud. I mean, he's a redshirt sophomore. He's a 3rd-year player, but they want to hit the big play too. That's what they thrive in. So, okay, they move from their own 21 to the Iowa 49, Now they're going to try the big play, and that's when Lucas Van Ness hits them. The ball goes up in the air, and Jack Campbell picks it off. That's why you got to stick with it. The ground acquisition theory of make them earn every damn inch of territory, because if they hit you for an 80-yarder, you're effed. You're screwed. But if they hit you for 15, 10, it feels like they're gaining ground, but ultimately there's that watershed moment there where you can kind of go, okay, we can get them on this. Or if Y.A. Black's playing, which I think he will, can he collapse the pocket and force a sack, and then they punt, and then they get frustrated, and then they start to press. And then that's when your offense has to make sure that, God damn it, you got the ball past the 50, go freaking score. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little frustrated because I'm just looking at these numbers going, do something, God damn it,
Yeah, it's I think everybody that follows this team feels that way, and I think you'd be lying if you didn't think there were people on the defensive side of the ball in Iowa's locker room. They're not going to say it, and they're not going to express it to their teammates or their coaches or us, but I'm sure there's frustration there that when you play as well as they're playing defensively and you're not getting anything out of it. I think for the defense, Scott, the focus needs to be, and I'm sure it was the off week, they played really good offensive line in Michigan and a solid offensive line in Illinois, and they gave up too many rushing yards. And if Ohio State is able to run the football, which it certainly is capable of doing, that's not good, because then you're going to get yourself out of position, thinking about that next run and where it's coming, and then that's when they hit you.
You're right, and they can definitely do that, and they probably will try. I mean, it wouldn't, it's probably one of those where, hey, this is probably the best defense we'll face until Michigan, maybe Alabama, maybe Georgia, maybe Tennessee or Clemson or somebody like that. We're going to have to work. We're going to have to work on these areas. I mean, this is like Spencer Lee playing against, wrestling somebody who's ranked, but not in the same territory. It's like, we know we're going to win, and we know we're going to play, we're going to score and do what we need to do. But we also need to figure out these aspects of our offense. And it very well could be, hey, Paris Johnson, you're going up against Joe Evans. That's a tough matchup. How do you win that battle? Because that guy's a first round draft pick, and so they're going to probably try to run, because they've got great running backs too. I mean, Henderson's been hurt a lot this year, and Williams is a good back too. And it's just, does Iowa, could Iowa's two gap style prevent them from getting that kind of attrition? And I don't know. I don't know. There's just so many different things that Ohio State can hit you with, that it's hard, because there's no other, the counter punch isn't there for Iowa. I kind of thought about an analogy that, it's like, an older over the hill type of fighter gets in the MMA ring with the champ, and he has got a pulled hamstring, and it's just like, no matter what you do, you're just not going to be able to, you're going to try to fight. You're going to be tough, because I expect them to fight. They have a lot of pride, but it's going to be really tough to try to do what you can do just to even stick with it.
Ari Gold in the YouTube chat room has a lot of suggestions on what Iowa can do. So hopefully the coaches check out that chat room. Milk the clock, Ari says. Yeah. That would be great if they could do that. Let's see. But hopefully we've given everybody a lot of hope in the first half hour of this podcast of what can happen Saturday in Columbus. But as Scott said, watch the game, see what happens. Upsets happen. Let's see if Iowa made – I too think moral victory, as much as it makes me kind of cringe a little bit to say it, when you're in year 24 of a coaching regime and you won the West last year, and you would think that there's a chance this week. Moral victory is probably on the table this week. And, that, you've got 5 important games left the rest of the season. If you can get a little bit of a springboard here by playing well against one of the top teams, if not the top team in the country, you take it.
Yeah, because what lies after this, I mean, they're going to be 3-4. You play Northwestern at home. There's motivation there. You've lost 3 straight at home to Northwestern. and you need to get back to, because that would, a loss isn't going to be devastating on Saturday here. A loss would be devastating against Northwestern because that will crush, that will send everybody over the edge.
Yep.
But if you play well, see something that, okay, we've got something here. Maybe we can build on that. And then the next week you beat Northwestern at home, and then you play Purdue, and that one seems more personal. Ohio State's more of a, you're going up a couple classes. That Purdue, for the first time, in my opinion, is really expected to win against Iowa, but it's a personal game. Maybe you did some things against Ohio State to make you think that it doesn't matter what Purdue has. We have a chance here, or if you're on your Iowa side. Then you get into 3 straight trophy games against rivals, and looking at those 3 games, I don't see a reason why Iowa can't win them. And I know people might go, what? They're going to lose them all. No, did you watch Wisconsin play Michigan State? Did anybody watch Minnesota play Illinois? There were 4, Tanner Morgan was 4 of 12 passing for 21 yards. Spencer was way better than that.
Is Morgan back this week?
I don't know. And, he's out. I don't know if he's coming back or not, but, that could be a key as to what happens with Penn State on the road. But
sure.
But you think about, Mo Ibrahim. Yes, he's a great running back, but I didn't see anything in Minnesota against Illinois to make me go, man, Iowa's going to really struggle here. It's going to be a fist fight, 60 minutes, and maybe they win, maybe they lose. But, when you look at that pig and you remember what the symbol of victory is, you got a chance. And then finally, do you really want to lose to Nebraska to end the season? So if Iowa can, realistically, lose this one, go 4-1 to finish, and you go to a bowl game, that's really helpful to get the 15 extra practices in December. And then it's like, hey, it wasn't our best season, but at least you got to a bowl game, because a lot of teams don't that have this type of year. And I think it's, again, something to build on, provided that the coaching staff learns the lessons from what not to do ever a freaking again going forward. And if they don't, then shame on them, because the season ticket sales are going to go through, fall through the bottom next year.
We're going to take a look at an article Scott wrote this week about Iowa's offense in the red zone, with the headline, Iowa football's dead zone. It's part philosophy, part execution, and part personnel. We'll dive into that on the other side of the break. We want to let folks know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors right now. I'm going to get another cup of coffee, and we'll be back on the other side to talk about Scott's article and break down Iowa's dead zone offense. And we are back. Thank you to the sponsors, one and all, for the support of the podcast. Scott, let's dive into this article. It was interesting. I saw this. You published it yesterday, I believe, on Wednesday, October the 19th. And it immediately brought to mind a question that I had gotten in the Mailbag podcast a few weeks ago from Jesse Lucier on Twitter about, he was just, neither one of us had the data of looking into but both of us were like, yeah, they don't really throw the ball into the end zone when they get down there. It's kind of weird, but you did the research. Tell folks about it.
Yeah. I was really starting to kind of think about this a couple of weeks ago, that, not only throwing, and I actually did a, full scale, but I cut out all the running numbers, which aren't any good either. But really it was about the passing that kind of got to me. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? And in the red zone over the last 14 games, which Iowa is 7-7 since the 6-0 start last year. I really wanted to examine what they do, how they throw it, how they run it in the red zone. And of course, it's all bad. Every aspect of it's bad, but the passing of it is so bad. It's really hard to gather. And I kind of divided it from inside the 10, and then of course the red zone as a whole. And over that 14-week period, they've thrown 15 passes inside the 10-yard line. So about a little over one per game for a total of 3 yards. This year, this is an unreal stat. This year, from inside the 10-yard line, they're 4 of 5 passing for 5 yards, 1 touchdown. And they had a 5-yard pass to Luke Lachey over the top of the goal line. And that's what they did, just to score. This year, that's the only pass they've thrown inside the 10 that actually is into the end zone. And if you will, that was barely into the end zone at that. And then when you look from the 11 to the 20 over those 14 games, they've got they're 8 of 17 for 47 yards. And that's still just absolutely god awful.
That's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, how are you throwing it that short all the time? But Spencer has only thrown 1 into the end zone from that distance. And that was to Laporta back at Rutgers. Okay. And on that play, Arlen Bruce was wide open underneath. Yep. So it's like, it shouldn't even have thrown it that. So this year they've thrown 2 passes into the end zone in 6 games. Overall, and I went back to last year over that last 8-game block, from inside the 10, they threw 3 other ones, and they were all Alex Padilla. No completions, but they were all Alex Padilla throwing in the end zone. And then that was from inside the 10. They only threw 1 other one into the end zone, and it was that fake pass against Michigan in the championship game to Monty Potabon. And that was just barely over the goal line as well.
Yeah, it's almost like it's hard to fathom what the strategy is here. Mm-hmm. You're trying to get into the end zone, but you're trying to do so by throwing short of the end zone and hoping you can get into the end zone. Yeah. When there are opportunities and you're in a position to be able to design routes into the end zone. It's really bizarre. It's so shocking. It's really, I went through it, then I went through it by personnel grouping and just, I spent way too much damn time on it and cut out so much of the research that it's like, I had to really stick to the relevant ones. But I mean, 15 passes for 3 yards over that span. I mean, this year you're looking at, pass, there was 4 completions. You had the 5-yarder to Lachey. Then you had a 1 yard, a 0, and a -1 inside the 10-yard line. That's throwing wide, that's throwing out routes, that sort of thing. God, throw it in the end zone, and I don't know, is it quarterback choice? Is it scheme? Yes, to both. I mean, quarterback probably is getting pounded to do it this way. The only thing I could think of is it's safer, but it's risk averse. But at some point, you're going to have to just take the step forward. And then looking back, Nate Stanley threw 47 red zone touchdowns, 1 red zone interception, which we all remember. But still, Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson combined for 21 of those red zone catches. And it's just unbelievable where they're going. I understand they don't have a fade route receiver yet. Maybe Brody Brecht gets into that, but you've got to run some routes in the end zone and get some people open, because this is just uncalled for. As you said, it's more than one thing, but I think it has to start with philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. And approach to give guys a chance, that risk averse approach. You're not really putting your players, and I think Kirk and Brian both said this during the bye weeks that we had, that you want to put your players in the best position to succeed. And it just seems like this cuts against that. that you're not really doing that. You're making it more difficult for them.
Yeah. I mean, you're asking guys other than probably Arlen Bruce and maybe a running back or something to do something that they're not capable of doing in some ways, which is being more athletic than the defender covering them. I mean, the
Yeah.
best way to score is to find an open position across the goal line, and you're not throwing it there. And when you're talking about your starting quarterback who's only thrown 2 passes in the last 14 games into the end zone, you're really that's more than just the quarterback. That's the philosophy, that's the strategy, that's the coordination, that's the play calling, that's everything. And when all the times with GD, with Greg Davis and throwing wide, and it's 4th and 3, and we remember that play against Purdue where I think it was James Vandenberg threw to 1-yard pass to Zach Derby out. He was tackled. Those plays don't work. I mean, unless you have a player who can beat somebody one-on-one, and they don't. So this is the philosophical part of things. There are things that Brian gets a lot of crap for that it's not really his fault. This one is. This one clearly is my own.
Yeah, and I think I would be a little bit more, I don't want to say comfortable, but I could understand it more if it was just this season
Yeah.
with just these guys. But as you researched, it goes back 7 games of last season with, is that right?
8
games of last season and 6 of this season. So it's deliberate.
Yeah. Well, I broke it down into 3 groups, and even though I didn't write that, but I guess I have my notes, which is the last 4 games of last year, which would be Kentucky, Michigan, Nebraska, and Illinois. They had 20 plays inside the 10-yard line, and they gained 21 yards. There were 12 runs for 23 yards and 2 touchdowns, 8 passes, and there were 3 of 8 for -2 yards, and no sacks, but they did have 2 false starts. In the 4 games preceding that, the 2 losses to Purdue, the win against Minnesota, and another win in there. Trying to remember which one, Northwestern. They ran 17 plays inside the 10-yard line for 26 yards, or 15 runs for 26 yards, 2 passes, 0 for 2. So that's rough. And then you get, spread it out, and I divided it into 11 through the 20, and for the first 6 weeks here, just from that distance, they ran 17 plays for 29 yards. They've had a sack. They have 7 passes, 4 of 7 for 13 yards from the 11 through the 20. I mean, you've got full depth available to you. And you think about one of those passes that was a 9-yarder that Arlen Bruce caught and then tripped. It would have been a touchdown. Yeah. And then now they've had a couple of other decent plays that and it got really, the yardage got chopped back quite a bit because of that flip pass in Illinois, because it's considered a pass. But I mean, just when you take this into totality, there's just it's really I don't know. There's a lot of different descriptions you can use for this, and they're not good.
Well, I wonder. I mean, like we said, they've had that bye week, and they talked about examining things, self-scouting and what they need to do better and what they can change. This seems like an easy one.
Mm-hmm. You'd think, around the goal line, hey, let's make sure we get a couple of routes into the end zone.
Yeah.
That's the best way to score, when you catch the ball over the goal line rather than run to the goal line. It's kind of like the difference between a layup and a jump shot. It's simple,
Yeah.
And so you'd think that'd be something that they look at. I'm sure I do know that sometimes they do read our stuff, and this one's probably one that they will read, and today is their off day, so I'm sure they will. But it's really important, because if they're inside the 5, take the sequence they had against Illinois, when Riley Moss forces a fumble, Seth Benson recovers it at the 5. I mean, they went incomplete pass, -3-yard run, then a 15-yard penalty, just that they're with the whole damn series, which the defense gave you a gift. Well, they still almost beat Illinois that way. They probably still should have. But you look at Ohio State, you've got to take advantage of every single one of those opportunities. This is one area where you need to look at and go, damn, we've really screwed up on this one. And I guarantee if the defensive coaches see this, they're going to be stewing themselves.
Yeah, and that first drive against Illinois too, where the ill-advised shovel pass to
There's Laporta.
Laporta.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, that's overthinking it. It's deciding, hey, I want to do something cool. I mean, you look at 2 trick plays. Now, granted, we want to see more exotics and fun stuff, but had he just handed the ball off to Arlen Bruce instead of because it was kind of a zone read type shovel pitch, Arlen would have scored. I mean, they had no running backs on the field at that time. It was the first time they ran the 0-2 offense, which was 2 tight ends and 3 receivers on the field. And then you look at the flip pass. It's like, I understand why you're trying something different here, but I don't know. I almost wonder, it's like, if you get inside the 5, maybe just decide, you know what, we're going to quarterback sneak it on 4 straight plays. You probably have more success, than trying something like that. Because that was like a -1 yard. And it just, again, it kind of fell apart. It's like, guys, you're making it too difficult. And the coaching isn't helping on this one. The coordination, the play call, none of it's helping.
It's always interesting to see what teams look like coming out of a bye and what changes may have been made, because we hear a lot about that from coaches. We're gonna break things down and we're gonna look at our team and we're gonna figure out what works and what doesn't work, and we're gonna go with those things and add in things that we think are gonna work. And oh yeah, you're gonna try to do it against Ohio State.
Yeah, right. It's like it would have been better off had Iowa played Ohio State last week and had their bye this week.
Yeah.
Just to get it out of the way, because it's just such a it's such a tough matchup, and they could self-scout all right that way. But yeah, I don't know, man. This is kind of almost in, and I hate to say it, but almost in the Licklider era hopelessness. At least this game, not across the board, but it just feels that way.
The offense resembles Licklider's offense.
Yeah. Oh,
listless, sure. Lackluster.
Yeah. Yes. I called that offense 30 seconds of fear and 5 seconds of panic.
Yeah, we don't need to revisit that.
Yeah, right.
Now. Watching this football offense is tough enough. Let's hop into a little recruiting, Scott. Some offers this past weekend. Mostly to skill guys, mostly to running backs, receivers, tight ends. So obviously trying to address obvious loss Kendrick Raphael. So running back is a need in this class. So Hop threw out some offers there. Arnold Barnes from down in the New Orleans area committed to Tulane. Kamari Moulton from South Florida, who played for Liddell Betts when Liddell Betts coached at Pinecrest down in the Fort Lauderdale area, another running back. There was a Tulane commitment too that got an offer. I'm forgetting his name right now, but
running back or Barnes?
I think it was a running back. Yeah.
Was it Arnold Barnes?
No, this guy was committed to Vandy. Barnes is committed to Tulane. So I'll try to remember him. But Jordan Faison is another maybe Faison is the guy who played for Betts. I'm getting these all mixed up. I did a bunch of these stories this week, but Faison, Faison, Jordan Faison is from Pinecrest, and he's an athlete. Also got an offer. And then I thought the most interesting one, Scott, was Ishmael Smith Flores. People will remember Leroy Smith fondly.
Right.
It's his son and Danon Hughes' godson.
Yeah.
Danon and Leroy played together at Iowa. late 80s, early 90s. So kind of a cool connection there. And they're not sure with him yet. Big kid. We talked about having a guy who could you could throw jump balls to in the end zone. This looks like a guy who could be that big wide receiver type, Brandon Smith type, and also could eventually develop into a tight end too, depending on how his body grows. But it was good to see the Iowa coaches out there during the bye week going after guys that are committed to other schools. This is something you would not have seen 10 years ago with Iowa. But all's fair in love and recruiting. And if you have guys that are still open to looking at other schools, you take the shot.
Yeah, you got to take the shot now. Because now they're getting to that point of, okay, 2 months left until signing day. You've got to start making some inroads with some of these players. You've got some games at home. You could bring them in for a visit, and maybe an official or whatever. But I think the bye week kind of did that. And I'm interested in running back. I had a conversation kind of also about Kendrick Raphael, what did or didn't happen there, and he just wants to take a step back. I was giving him a little space, but they still communicate. It's not necessarily that he's completely out, but it's not that I don't think they're expecting it either. But Nolan Ray would be a really interesting one still. They're still up on him, and this week, get past this week and maybe kind of see who might want to come to campus. But of all of them, to me, though, it's really about receiver. And they're kind of going after some really interesting guys. As you said, Jordan Faison from Fort Lauderdale is a guy that Liddell Betts coached. I really, Ryan Mooney is a really fascinating one. I think he went to Duke last week to check it out. He's a guy that's a lacrosse player. I think it's lacrosse, right? And
Faison?
No, Mooney.
Well, Faison is too. Faison is committed to
Notre Dame
for lacrosse.
Okay. Yeah, Mooney
worked out with Nico.
Yeah,
Nico was a lacrosse player.
That's right. So yeah, they need to. There's a lot there, and so I don't know, man. I still think that maybe they're still planning on it, but you still got to go to the portal. You can't just you can try to get as many as you want, but once the portal opens, you've got to be more aggressive than you ever have been before, because they just can't afford to do this.
Kamorian Pimpton was the guy I was thinking of, a tight end out of Texas who's committed to Vanderbilt. So
okay,
yeah, obviously tight end is a position, wide receiver and running back. Those I think are at 17 commitments in this class, 23.
I think that's right. 17 since what's his face dropped out. Raphael dropped out. So
you've got room here, and I don't know where else you would want to add than those skill positions.
Right. Yeah, you got to. And but the other thing is that I think like running back is a different game than receiver right now.
Yeah.
Because they've got 4 guys who are sophomores or younger that are capable of playing. And I don't even know, maybe Devin Hilson is too, but I like Jazz Patterson. I think it's just kind of a numbers game with him. But Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams to me are guys you can really ride off with. And but receiver is the one that they've got to attack. And maybe they are here, but I think that's also a portal attack. And whenever somebody opens up, you got to be all over them, because you cannot have what happened, really all season, but especially the first 2 games, because that was an abomination.
It's really a balancing act, Scott, because even if you're in the portal or you're going junior college or you're going high school, you're trying to get quality players to play a position that you're struggling with currently in your program. And you have to sell to these recruits that they can help. And I think Iowa is able to do that to a degree with Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce and Brody Brecht saying, hey, you're going to have an opportunity to play early. And they all did. Yeah. Brody was hurt last year, but as soon as he was healthy, he got in there this year. Obviously, Keegan and Arlen played as true freshmen. That's really the selling point. You got to say, listen, we're going to most likely lose Nico. We don't know what's going on with Keegan Johnson, just in terms of, his injuries and health. So you have an opportunity to come in and play right away. You have to find kids that want to do that, as opposed to, a situation like with Charlie Jones, where Charlie Jones is, I can play in this system, or I can go somewhere where they throw the hell out of the ball. So it's tough. It's hard to convince enough guys, the right guys, to come on board when you're in a position like this.
And that's where they're going to have to trust their evaluations and be better at them than they have been in the past. I mean, the ideal situation for Iowa is a Charlie Jones from Buffalo, which is he played well at a MAC school. He's looking for a bigger, better opportunity. He wants to play at a major school, and Iowa could say, look, we're a passing game short of being a really, really good team, and we could use somebody like you. You're going to have every opportunity to come in and play right away. And the chance for somebody to go from a MAC school or Missouri Valley Conference school and play in a Big Ten environment and showcase your ability against some of the best defensive backs in the world, I think you could sell that. The problem is you can't sell a fifth-year guy necessarily, or fourth-year guy looking for their last year and wanting to showcase their abilities in a different offense. Yeah, that's not going to work. And you're not going to be able to go out and get a 4-star unless they love the Hawks.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. So you're just going to have to build it organically. And they've had capable players like that, but they're just going to have to alter the offense too, to showcase those players a little bit more often, because, look at Charlie Jones. That is an indictment. And it's not, and there is style of play. I mean, Iowa does do things differently than Purdue, and Purdue can vault those numbers up that Iowa can't, but that's just one small aspect. You've got to, he had opportunities, or they didn't give them to him last year when he had 21 targets and 14 catches, and he made some big plays. Iowa State, Minnesota, stuff like that. But
the chasm between where Purdue is and where Iowa is in a passing game. It's not like he went to Purdue like in 2009 or 10 when you had Marvin McNutt and Durrell. You look at that and you make a switch to Purdue now, what Purdue looks like now, you're like, it's a move forward, because you're going to a offense that relies more on the pass. But look at Iowa, still throws the ball successfully. It's not that now. It's just a giant gulf.
Yeah, it's not like Jamison Williams going to Alabama from Ohio State.
Right.
No,
it's not.
So it's, man, I can't play in this offense. It's not going to do anything for me. And now, and he bet on himself and he won big, because now he's got a chance to be a draft pick. At Iowa, he would have been at best a free, undrafted free agent. And he's good. We had him, I think, as our second team All-American receiver. He would not have been a second team All-American receiver at Iowa. And so Iowa's going to have to fight that. And that's a legitimate fight. And that's one that they're going to have to answer to on the recruiting trail when they go after these receivers. And, but they're going to have to be creative. They're going to have to look at receivers, maybe, Division II guys. They love doing that for the other spots, but they're going to have to do the same at wide receiver. And the one thing that they've probably missed on more receivers than any other position, because a lot of times they'll take the third or fourth guy in Florida, fourth tier guy, and then they never do anything, because we look at what happened with, just name the receiver, in Texas with Bobby Kennedy, and then in Florida they grab guys and then they flame out. So they're going to have to be very careful, because they're going to have to get somebody who can at least step in and play, even if it's just modest level.
And a lot of these offers that we're talking about that went out in the last week are Texas and Florida, which is interesting that I was diving back in there. Very talented states. But then you wonder, Scott, what you're saying, are they going after guys that are in the lower tiers? And then in conjunction with that, is Iowa a place where they are proficient at developing receivers? Where's the receiver development coming? I mean, we've seen it a little bit, but did Tyrone Tracy develop? Is Arlen Bruce developing? Amir did, I think. You could say he did, but he had a pretty good starter kit. That I wonder, it's a combination of identification, evaluation, and then development, right? Because they're doing that at the other positions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a great question because I don't know. I mean, you look at Tyrone Tracy and him leaving Iowa for Purdue. He hasn't done anything at Purdue that makes you go, man, and we really miss that. Other than the fact that he's a competent receiver and they could have used
help.
that. Yeah,
but that's more about the state you're in than really what he is.
Right. But was that because he's limited anyway, and or is it because Iowa just never developed him over his 3 to 4 years? That I don't know. And then you look at Amir had unbelievable speed, just game breaking speed. And he developed. He was always raw. He was raw in the NFL, which is why he got cut the other day. Had some really bad plays for the Bears. Brandon Smith, I think he developed to an extent, but I know he was very, very, very frustrated by the way he was used, especially in his last year. And so there's that's a great question. I mean, is
Tavon
that
Smith?
Yeah, Tavon Smith, and he was a different coach. Had him, but Tavon had more ability than what he was allowed to show or whatever.
Yep.
And is that the holistic, or are we talking specific receiver coach development?
Yeah.
And does it all fit together? I don't know. I mean, would they be better off with a different wide receiver coach? Would they be better off with somebody like Marvin McNutt, who's now a wide receiver coach at who understands the system, and somebody that Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset went and worked out with because they respected him so much? That might not be the worst idea in the world for Iowa.
Yeah. It's always that, the chicken or the egg. Is it the front end evaluation? Mm-hmm. Is it the development? It's probably a combination of the two.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure.
And they need to figure it out.
Yeah.
And right now, because they need to get guys in the program now that can help next year.
Yeah. And they're only going to be able to do that if they hit the portal. I mean, because you can't take a raw athlete from wherever high school,
Florida, Texas, wherever, there's going to be some development time needed.
Yeah. They're not just going to be able to walk in the door. And even if you're here, like Keegan and Arlen were different because they actually had the ability right away. And how do they feel? Do they feel like
they both enrolled early, right?
Yeah, they enrolled early. So they were, in the spring, they were showing case and their abilities.
Right.
And they vaulted up the list very quickly. And then were, big.
And that's because they didn't have a lot in front of them either,
right.
Which is, again, part of the problem.
Well, and in that case,
and they lost Amir and Brandon, so I get that.
Yeah, they did have Charlie Jones at the time.
Right.
They did have Tyrone Tracy, and they did have Nico Reganey. So, but they were like 4 and 5. And Keegan was a little bit ahead of Arlen at that time, but they were all in that. Okay, they could play, and then they started inching their way upward. But they had the ability to play right away too. You're not going to find those types of athletes right away. That's the problem. And unless they go to the portal and grab a Charlie Jones from Eastern Michigan type, or and even then they want to catch passes too. So good luck, but you've made your own bet on this one. This one's about, I mean, this is an Iowa issue. This isn't just a circumstantial issue like it was the first 2 games, yes, but holistically, it's an Iowa issue.
I don't think I've asked you this on the podcast, but somebody asked me this in the mailbag recently. Who's Iowa's starting quarterback in 2023?
Not on the roster.
Do you think it's Marco?
It could be
or
Marco.
Transfer portal?
Yes, I think it's a portal guy. I just don't. If they would have had, they can say all they want that they have faith or whatever in Alex Padilla and believe in him and have confidence in him. And then they're gonna always say that. But
that ship has sailed, right? He's
yeah,
probably going to move. He must have. I mean, if I'm in his position, if I'm in his shoes, I'm like, I'm not valued here.
yeah. I mean, you look at the first 2 weeks, and the way Spencer played in those 2 games. Really the last 4 he played okay, but the first 2, that should have said, "Hey, we got to have something else in there. This is just not good enough." And he hasn't taken a single snap in any of these games, and and Joey Labus hasn't moved up past it. So then he's a.
It sounds like he hasn't gained. I mean, at least if you take Brian's comments at face value, it sounds like he hasn't made up any ground.
Right. And I haven't heard anything about, Carson May, except for Caleb Johnson's, Instagram feed, but even then, and I asked him about it. It's just, it's a freshman in college. He's buddy. And he's just like, hey, that's my guy. I don't blame him. I'm not going to get on him about that.
People just lose their minds over things like that and just don't put yourself in an 18, 19-year-old kid's head again. Try to anyway. I don't want to go back into 18 or 19-year-old Rob Howe's head at all. I don't need to be back there at all in that space.
Me either. That's so far along. I wouldn't mind having 18, 19-year-old Scott Dockman's body, but not the mind. I don't think the mind today, but no, it's just when you look at Caleb and, I don't think that they have a guy. I mean, it could be Marco. It sure could, but I also would probably think that if I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if I was to make a projection, it's that Alex Padilla graduates in December. He'll probably look for another opportunity. I can't speak to Joey Labus or, maybe they decide to stick around. I don't know. But if I'm Spencer, I try the NFL or, and leave. I wouldn't come back for a COVID year for crying out loud. And then finally, I would imagine that some quarterback out there is going to want that opportunity to come to Iowa and do something bigger, and it's probably not going to be a Power 5 transplant, because then you're just kind of accepting another type of quarterback like that, but it's going to be more of a Southeast Missouri State quarterback, looking for that opportunity.
Why couldn't you get a guy? I mean, maybe not Peyton Ramsey level, but it's not like these things don't happen elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, I looked last year at like Keaton Slovis, who AJ Epineza hurt in that Holiday Bowl. And he left USC and went to Pitt. And I'm like, why go to Pitt, who lost their offensive coordinator, instead of Iowa? And did Iowa even try that? I do know that they tried a couple of guys. Adrian Martinez was one of them, which was really so bizarre. But
could you imagine if that would have been, you talk about square peg in a round hole. That thing, that does not seem like it makes any sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, but maybe they figured, hey, at least he can do all the things that we've asked about.
We'll move him to receiver.
Yeah, right. Well, that's not going to happen. And there are others, but they never, it's all about, did you do it or didn't you do it? It's not about how they could play. We could, play hypotheticals all day. And so I think this is they've got to go after it. They got to attack it. Then they probably got to attack it at offensive line too. And they've got to put aside this narrow interpretation of what a Hawkeye is. And they got to be more accepting of somebody else fitting in and bringing a melting pot of ideas and talents, not just you do it this way and this is the way we do it. That's just,
it's out of the comfort zone, right? It's that risk averse. You have to take some risk.
I mean, they hit the portal for one guy, and he's a third team tight end, maybe fourth team tight end.
And sounds like he got off on a bad foot to start with Kirk, and really hasn't gotten his feet under him.
Yeah, right. So that's like, okay, well, he'll be maybe the third tight end next year alongside Lachey and probably Ostrenga, because I think Ostrenga's doing well, and maybe even Johnny Jacuzzi, So, yeah, is that,
Lord
I,
help us if Alex Padilla goes somewhere and has success.
oh yeah. Well, I've been wondering that about Deuce for a long time.
Yeah.
If he gets out there and replaces Will Levis for a game or two, but it's a disaster, you know. And then you look on the other side of the ball, um, losing Jack Campbell will be very difficult.
And
He's kind
Riley
of,
Moss.
and Riley Moss. They've had so many injuries. Do you think somebody like Terry Roberts would explore his 6th year? I kind of think he would.
He's had so many injuries that it almost doesn't feel like he's had the full college experience because he's been
Yeah.
off the field so much.
And you get Jamari Harris back. That's going to be a big lift. What do you do with Cooper DeJean? Xavier Wampa is probably going to start. He should at this point. Maybe he replaces Kayvon Merriweather, and you feel like your secondary is in a pretty good spot. Then Justin Jacobs is going to return. It sounds like. Does Seth Benson decide to go to the NFL or stick around for 6 years? I guess we'll find out over time. But Jay Higgins isn't a bad player, and I think the talent up front, they're going to lose some experience, but I think the talent up front is that sophomore level. Lucas Van Ness, Y.A. Black, you have Logan Lee back for one more year, Deontay Craig, Max Llewellyn, Ethan Herkett, Aaron Graves. I think that I think Jeremiah Pittman will probably join the rotation. So other than Jack Campbell and maybe Riley Moss, I don't necessarily look at that unit and go, those two will be, and it's particularly Campbell will be very, very difficult to replace. But then offensive line, you're not losing anybody. So you hope that they get better. Running backs, I think they'll be good. I think they're good now. I think they could be very good next year. It's just about the passing game. Everything connected to the passing game, from the players to the scheme to the coaches. That to me needs, you can't just rely on the same. It's just not going to work.
Play action isn't effective when you can't throw the ball. It kind of defeats the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So
or run it.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah,
we're running an offense that is not effective.
Yeah. Man, this is going to be a fun offseason, Rob. I mean, we heard a lot last year, and it's going to be just the same, especially if they double down on it, or, double dog down on everything,
We will we're going to talk more basketball next week as the season gets a little bit closer. A week from Monday, which will be October 31st, Halloween, Iowa men open it's or their preseason. They have an exhibition game against Jeff Horner and Truman State. So we'll kind of preview the season a little bit more next week with men's basketball, because there's not a lot going on right now. Women's basketball came out yesterday. Number 4 in the AP, Scott. That's Lisa, I think, told you guys up in Minneapolis last week that they embrace the expectations. It's cool to say that, but you just don't know. I think the makeup of this team with 5 starters back is well positioned to handle those expectations, but it's different when you go out there with the target on your back every night. And I think Iowa State's 8th. So women's basketball in the state this year, a lot of high expectations.
It's great, isn't it? I agree with Lisa on that. Everybody, when you have Caitlin Clark on your team, then you have a target on your back. And the fact that they're 4th, sure, bring it on. They've got Monica Zizano, they have Kate Martin, and Molly Davis, a woman that they brought in. It's kind of a backup, but basically a starter is going to play starter minutes. They've got enough pieces in enough places to where they feel like they can do some damage, and they know that they're going to get everybody's best shot. I mean, they already won the Big Ten last year. They won the Big Ten tournament. They also have they're playing some quality opponents. NC State at home in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, Iowa State at home. One thing, it's funny, my wife doesn't really get into sports. She loves watching Iowa women's basketball. We bought season tickets for the first time, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I can go because I might cover a couple of these games, but she's all in. So I think a lot of people are as well. So it's kind of fun.
Yep, should be a fun women's basketball season, and it's not far off. Um, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how the West Division is shaping up in football next week too. We'll push that to next week because we've put off the inevitable long enough in this podcast, and it's Scott and my picks suck. So I think we're doing the service kind of reverse. Like if you go against what we're picking, you may win. So look at it that way. Approach it that way. When you're opening your betting app on your phone, saying which way did Howe and Doctorman go on this? All right, they picked this. I'm going the other way.
I tell you what, last week was about as bad as it gets for me in every single way possible. You went 3-2, I went 1-4. So I got crushed and like the Minnesota, I picked Minnesota -6.5 and they look just dreadful. And we both picked Wisconsin and
yeah, that was bad. I watched that game. I don't know what's going on with Wisconsin.
You want to talk about a program in turmoil. I mean, Iowa knows where it is. It's Wisconsin, is losing receivers left and right to the transfer portal. I've heard that there's some issues there internally. So just that bears watching as the season kind of goes on here. I mean, they play Purdue at home this week.
Favorite to win the division. They're 1-3. Yeah. Iowa was the second pick, correct?
Yeah,
or was it Minnesota? Was it Iowa?
Iowa, yeah.
1-2. And Minnesota was behind that, and it's 1-2. So
yeah, exactly. So you at least picked Michigan -7. I was stupid enough to think Penn State could hang, and then Purdue. It's funny when they were up 13 and missed the extra point. I said, "Oh, that could really impact some people right now," because it was a -14, and of course Nebraska scored, so it made that point moot. But
still entertaining game.
Yeah, it certainly was. But this week we saw 5 games, and the first one is Indiana at Rutgers. Rutgers -3. I'm going to go with Rutgers. I think Rutgers is, if nothing else, is a mentally tough team. They're at home. I like the way Rutgers is playing. I'm not saying they're going to go to a bowl, but they might. And this is one of those games where I think they do. They win.
Yeah, these two teams are tough to figure out. You talk about coaches in the Big Ten on the hot seat. I got to figure Tom Allen is probably a little warm. His is a little warm right now. And these are the type of games where he needs to win to kind of get some momentum in a very tough division. But I don't see it. I think Rutgers is making incremental steps forward. I think it's got a strong defense. And I will go with you. I will throw the 3 points and take the Scarlet Knights at home.
Yeah.
You can't do a red out this week, though.
Yeah, I know.
Or Scarlet out or whatever the hell it is.
Scarlet and Crimson are really close. So I don't know. That's that doesn't work too well. Northwestern at Maryland. Maryland -13.5.
Wow.
And I've also seen it at 14, so we can take it either way. I'm going to go with Northwestern. And Northwestern does some weird things during the course of the season. And some of those are accidentally winning or playing close games with teams that shouldn't.
Accidentally winning. That's a good term. I got to use that more often.
That usually happens in Iowa City. But I don't know. I mean, Tagovailoa is iffy. I would say questionable is a good cause. Maryland also does some weird things during the course of the year, which is accidentally losing to teams like this from time to time. I think Maryland clearly is the most talented team on the field. They've got 2 receivers that are better than you put, 5 of the West Division teams together, and they don't equal that. But I don't know. Northwestern just has the feel of a team that can grind out some yards with Evan Hull and Peter Skoronski blocking people, and then all of a sudden, I'm not saying they're going to win, but I'm saying that they can keep it close.
Yeah, Fitz will try to muck this thing up, and because he knows he doesn't have the speed and the athleticism to keep up with Maryland. So it's a matter of, does Maryland look at Northwestern and say, yeah, we can pretty much just run out there and beat this team? and that's what Northwestern is hoping for. I can't take Northwestern. I can't with what I've seen from them this year, and I know they have had they mucked it up at Penn State, and maybe
Yeah.
that's what happens here at Maryland. But I'm uh, I'm gonna hope that Maryland has its top quarterback, and if
Mhm.
so, I think scores enough to cover the 13.5. We're going with
Yeah.
13.5.
13.5. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go 2 touchdowns.
Okay. All right. This one is to me the most interesting game of the weekend in the Big Ten, and that's Purdue at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is favored by 2.5. Now, I think they've won 15 straight against the Boilermakers, but I would say that this is probably the best matchup for Purdue. They've had some decent teams, but whereas Iowa's struggled with Purdue, Wisconsin has not. But going to Camp Randall, I think this is a moment of truth game for the Boilermakers. I'm going to go with the Boilermakers to pull out the win on the road.
Yeah, so Wisconsin's favored, right?
Yeah, 2.5 point favorite.
I'll take the 2.5. Purdue's a better team. I mean, if you watch these two teams this year, Purdue's just a better team. That now the better team doesn't always win, and that's a tough place to play. And this is a chance for Wisconsin to kind of right the ship a little bit, get right game, if you will. But I don't think Wisconsin's very good, so I can't, in good conscience, bet on it.
Yeah, I am there with you. This one is a game where I can see a lot of scenarios taking place, and that is Minnesota at Penn State. Penn State giving up 4. They're a 4-point favorite. We'll let you start on this one.
I'm going to take the Nittany Lions. Okay. Whether or not Tanner Morgan plays, I think Penn State kind of gets back on track here. Michigan's just a really good team, and I think I think people will be down on Penn State a little bit. And I know the dynamic of the offensive coordinator for Minnesota going back and all that stuff. But I just think Penn State is the superior team here, and 4 points just isn't a lot to cover. So I'll take the Nittany Lions. Is it a whiteout this week too?
It is. It's a night game, a whiteout. So yeah, maybe we'll get a chance to watch that. So, yep, I'm also going to take Pennsylvania State, and part of that is because I just can't figure out Minnesota. There are games like against Michigan State when Tanner Morgan was 23 at 26. And then there are games against Illinois where he's 4 at 12. And it's just, and whether
I think Altman Bell's absence is starting to show up a little more.
Yeah, I agree. And now the one flip of that is I've seen, like last week, you saw Minnesota, Michigan run for 400 yards, which is just an unreal number.
Yeah.
And Mo Ibrahim can do that. So that's something that I think they're capable of doing and ruining some days there. But I'm still going to go with Penn State. I think Penn State probably wins in the whiteout. And, James Franklin says, look, the East Division's still much better than the West.
Yeah, because you beat 1 and 2 Minnesota.
Yeah, right. So finally, the one that we've talked about ad nauseum, the numbers, I've seen the numbers a little bit all over the place. One I'm throwing out there is 29.5 for the Buckeyes.
That's the last one I've seen.
Yeah. Rob, I'm going to take Iowa just on this. I'm not going to take them to win or anything, but I just think that Iowa does a nice job of backdoor covering on some of these games. And I think the defense is capable of maybe turning defense into offense and maybe making it a 41-17 game when in fact it doesn't feel that close.
I'd like if it would just nudged up to that 30. I'd like it even more, but I'm with you. I like the 29.5. That's a lot of points. You don't see Iowa lose games very often. You can look at, the Michigan game in the Big Ten championship last year.
Yeah.
Iowa doesn't lose games by 30 points very often. Right. Just by the nature of what we've talked about throughout this podcast of the philosophy. And I think in this case, it works to its advantage in terms of that big number. And I think I have faith in Iowa's defense. We talked about it a lot in this podcast. I think Iowa's defense shows up and performs well in this game, and that's enough to keep it under the 29.5.
Yeah. I'm kind of dallied anywhere from 45-10 to 35 16, just stuff like that. I don't see Iowa winning or coming within more than a couple of touchdowns, but I do think that, there is a lot of pride. They're a good, tough defense. You've seen what happened with Wisconsin, but Iowa's defense is better. Now, granted, its offense isn't, but I think it could be a tough one. And if they can at least show some progress, provide some hope, then I don't think the rest of the season is quite a loss. I think they've got a chance in the final 5 games, even on the road at Purdue. But you just don't want to get boat raced. You don't want to get 59-0 out there or anything like that. So, because that's going to make a really tough final month for us too.
Yes. I think I picked 34-10 in my preview.
Okay.
So 24 points.
Yeah.
It's probably in that range, 21 to 24, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the number is so high that, the people who don't really know Iowa are automatically looking at their offense going, God.
Well, that's the narrative though, right?
Yeah.
And not that it's not deserved.
You're right.
That Iowa's offense is just pathetic right now. And that's probably why the line is where it is. If you just look at the numbers, that spread of whatever Ohio State averages, 49 plus a game, and
almost 49, yeah,
14 and change. That's your point spread, basically.
Yeah, right. Man, this is sad, isn't it?
Well, Scott, have a safe trip to Columbus. I will be here on my couch watching this game, and we will have the Rapid Reaction podcast with Jovan Johnson and Jordan Canzeri after the game here on the Hawk Fanatic feed. So please tune in for that. When you're out tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm flying out tomorrow mid-afternoon or early afternoon, and hope to get there mid-evening. We'll see. But and then
what's the route?
I go to Minneapolis and then over. So, and then on the way back, I get stuck going to Charlotte and then back, which kind of sucks. But
that's goofy.
Yeah, I know. I wish it was more, going to O'Hare or something like that. But what are you going to do? The only thing I looked at, I'm like, man, it's completely reverse from what happened in Rutgers for me time-wise, to where
you got extra time now.
Yeah, I don't fly out till like 3 on Sunday, and I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I could do all my post-day writing and stuff, but still, I would have rather had that Rutgers slept more than an hour.
Well, check out Scott. Check out The Athletic for Scott's coverage of the Iowa-Ohio State game. We will be back a week from today to preview the homecoming Northwestern game, look back at this Ohio State game a little bit, and talk some more women's basketball as the season approaches. We'll hit on some more recruiting and all that good stuff. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening, and we will be back to talk to you a week from today. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.